What's up, good people? I'm your host, Barry Bonds. I got my co-host with me, Game Beats. My other co-host, Pappy Black, is not here today, but we got the great Brandon Robertson with the Smoke Talk Podcast today. What's up, B?
Nothing, man. I'm so glad to join you guys and talk. It's been a long time coming. I even bought a special smoke. I'm not gonna smoke it because I got company logos on the back, but I bought this case that my boy Brendan that I went to grad school with bought for me when I actually announced my being hired by Bally. And I've never had anything like this before, but I want to give credit where credit is due. It's like a whole case full of Cubans.
Oh yeah,
humidor. That's a humidor right there.
Exactly. Yeah, and then it has like this thing in it.
Yeah, that keeps
it fresh.
Yeah.
I don't really smoke cigars like that, but it looks cool on the coffee table. It looked like you're an intellectual or something, so I keep it there. I just felt like putting that on camera, you know.
Man, for the people who don't know, Brandon is a journalist, personality, executive producer, entrepreneur, just to say a few.
That's right.
Podcast, great man. That's a great man right here.
New Jersey native.
Yeah.
Don Bosco graduate.
Okay, gang.
Eastern University, Hofstra.
All right.
You know, this brother's put in a lot of work, man. And yo, I want to start off by saying, hey, Brandon, I've had the pleasure of doing interviews with you, and now I have the pleasure of interviewing you.
Yes.
And I want to say I appreciate you and thank you for your time, brother.
Of course, man. Of course, we done done a lot with Barry, making runs to Harlem over on Convent Avenue.
Yeah.
On a late night and moving around Jersey City, going to Harlem. All that stuff, but it's cool to see you guys and your growth and just what you're doing with your podcast. And I'm looking forward to all that y'all will be doing in 2022.
Big fact. Same here, brother.
Same here, man. You're a great sports writer for Bally Sports currently, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to start off by starting from the beginning of your career. Tell me what it was like at 12 years old, doing radio and getting with the New Jersey Nets at the time.
It was a great start because it was a culmination of so many things that had happened, probably from age 5, 6 to now, or to 12 specifically. So even before the Nets, the love for basketball started in '91. Watching the NBA on NBC, Marv Albert, Matt Guokas, the Czar, Mike Fratello on the broadcast, and then the halftime report. You had any iteration of Hannah Storm, Bob Costas, Matt, just a myriad of people. Isaiah Thomas, watching the halftime report. My stepdad is actually from Chicago, west side of Chicago, Northwestern grad, born and raised on the west side. And he turned on the radio, or rather the TV, and I saw this bald-headed guy named Michael Jordan grace him on the TV screen. And, I remember at the time, my mom was a single mom, and I'd be watching the NBA on NBC in my mother's bedroom in our apartment in Irvington, New Jersey. And I remember falling in love with the game. So then you have that. Then even before that, my family ran and operated a men's shoe store and a family sneaker store called the Athlete's Foot, which is the only Black-owned Athlete's Foot in New York State. It was in Harlem, both stores on 125th Street. So I remember, seeing guys like Hakeem Olajuwon, Spud Webb, Dominique Wilkins, Clyde Drexler do sneaker releases in the store. So that kind of made me comfortable with being around basketball players, celebrities, and more. And then I had an uncle who ran a basketball league in Harlem called Citywide, which, Kenny Smith came out of, Bernard King, Stephon Marbury, Ross Strickland, Mark Jackson. So I was around the New York City, grassroots basketball and was introduced to that early on between Sneaker Store, Rucker Park, my uncle at Citywide and all that stuff. So by the time the Nets came along in 97, it was the culmination of relationship building even back then. I remember vividly, going into the Nets facility, then in East Rutherford and New Jersey, and my baby sister was in her baby carriage, and my mom and my stepfather were married by then. She was my sister was 1 year old, so that journey has always made me or put me in a position of I've grown as my baby sister has grown, and I look at my career as how she's now out of grad school and figuring life out, and I've been cultivating this relationship with basketball, and, in the same vein. So the Nets thing came about because I auditioned at Chelsea Pier in Manhattan to be a kid's personality for a radio show called Oswald Radio, and essentially the Oswald Radio was at Liberty Science Center in Jersey City, and audition, killed the first audition. Second audition was at Dangerfield's Comedy Club. Got a call, killed it, did a commercial with the Crash Dummies. And then at the same time, the Nets were rebranding their team. So you had John Calipari, who was the head coach and the vice president of basketball operations. Keith Van Horn was their draft pick. And so they were looking for a kid who loved basketball. And so this was the 97-98 Bulls last dance season. And, it kind of just flowed with everything going on. And there's the long form to your question.
Right. So being 12 years old and 13, a young journalist, how was that, or was it just normal to you because you didn't know it any different?
I appreciated the opportunity even then, and I realized that you didn't at the time like now, for example, you see a lot of kid reporters in a social media era age where that's kind of more normal. Back then you didn't really see it at all.
Absolutely not.
So for me, I appreciated it, and I recognized the significance, even not even little things like rubbing elbows with people who are now, considered senior level in the industry that maybe on their way out or still very well known. But the combination of that with retired players now, like the guys who were in their prime back then are now front office people, and with one of the 30 teams in the league, they're doing TV. They're responsible for behind the scenes trades. And so that relationship as a kid pays off now because many of them remember me and will pick up the phone and tell me certain things.
Right. Yes, you definitely.
At 12, you knew that that's what you wanted to do? You were sure, you're positive?
Even before the Nets came along, I remember going to a 7-Eleven, and Barry, you know this a little bit because we were in the studio at 97 when I was talking to AB. You came with me. And I remember picking up the newspaper and reading it on the way home or watching 60 Minutes. I used to watch Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes, and he grew up a child prodigy. He knew what he wanted to do. And I've just always been fascinated with asking questions. And I think, when you look at basketball comparatively, in the 90s, somebody was a specialist. So Del Curry was a 3-point specialist. Steve Kerr was a 3-point specialist. You knew Michael was a premier shooting guard. He could play defense, but he could score at will. But in today's culture, comparatively in basketball, you have slashes. Like LeBron is a more muscular version of Magic Johnson, but he's a better scorer naturally than Magic Johnson is. And I think the same applies in journalism where there's many slashes. So I think I learned the basics from old school journalism, but in today's digital space, I expanded it. So the long form answer to your question is, I think that when I was in NBA locker rooms and I was around players, that wasn't common. That wasn't every day. And as I sat back and just watched, I was like, yo, I could see myself doing this in the future, and I got a head start because I'm a kid. So we watched Stephen A. Smith on First Take. I remember seeing Stephen A. when he was, he was a Sixers beat writer for the Inquirer. I remember seeing Woj in the locker room when, he was covering the Nets and the Knicks for the Bergen Record newspaper. I remember, seeing Chris Broussard when he was at the New York Times. These guys were my age now and younger when I started. And then now they're, more senior level, some still flourishing, some really flourishing, and some, on their way out or retiring. So I think I just came at a pivotal moment now where social media is everything. And some people, their age group, can't run social media like that. So it's this is a new dawn of just how you do your thing. And there's so many avenues.
I remember seeing you, doing your thing with the Nets on TV. I would watch the games, I would see you at halftime, and I would be like, wow, they really got a kid up in. It was so amazing to me. I was like, wow, he really he really gonna be something. Never knowing I would ever meet you or know you and see what you flourished into now. But I think that was one of the dopest things ever.
I appreciate that. I get that a lot. And that was back when, like Fox Sports would do features on me, or like NBA Inside stuff with Ahmad Rashad, or just, various things. Like it opened my eyes. But I think now that I'm older, I realize as a Black male, that's such a misnomer. Those opportunities aren't usually given to people that look like us. And so to be one of the ones, it's both an honor, but you also got to be so careful because, when you look like us, you don't get many chances. And so you have to be very careful, not only what you say, how you move, but who you help.
That's a fact, man. That's a fact. Over your career, man, you've been in a lot of locker rooms. You interviewed a lot of players, a lot of former players. And what would you say is your biggest interview to date?
Humbly, I've lost count. Right,
you had a lot of them. You was with the greats. All right, well, maybe what was your favorite? One of your favorites, rather.
So I'll quantify it as kid, and then I'll quantify it for different reasons. So, as a kid, probably three of my favorite interviews. One are probably the people that were very misunderstood. So, I remember back during my time with the Nets in the visitors' locker room, and you're talking like old Nets, Continental Airlines Arena, this visitors' locker room, whenever you open the door, it's made this squeaky noise, and you had to put they needed WD-40 on that door because it just made a lot of noise. Like I remember being in front of the locker room after a game, and Phil Jackson was standing there. He's tall as hell, and he's like people weren't paying him attention, and he was like, "So are you guys gonna yap, or are you gonna listen to what I have to say?" And I just vividly remember that because that's Phil Jackson.
Right.
Me personally, being inside that locker room, sitting down with Karl Malone back when he was a member of the Utah Jazz, and Jeff Hornacek was in that locker room with he and John Stockton. And I remember reading later that at the time, Karl Malone was traveling with a gun in his bag. And when I read the article, that was around the time the Jazz were on a road trip, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" I'm interviewing Karl Malone while he got a gun in his bag. I thought that was crazy. I remember sitting down with Reggie Miller and before a game, and I remember back when everybody had the CD Discmans, and you would, like, if you didn't want to buy the speaker to go with it, you would take like the computer speaker from like your compact, and then you would plug the jack into your CD, and then you had a speaker.
Right.
So like when you go into the Nets visit or the visiting locker room at Continental Airlines Arena, like that locker room was like an old hockey locker room. So like when you walk in, you walk to the left, there's this room that like the coaches go in, and like the star players, if they don't want to be bothered, you look to the right. It's like the hockey jersey hooks. And then you walk straight ahead, and it was like a bathroom that had like the like when you go to the mall and they have the bathroom doors that have like the doors you open, you close it, and you lock it. Yeah. It was like that in the locker room. Then you had the two stalls in the shower, but it was just very elementary. Then they had like this rollout TV that you, like when you had it, when it was a rainy day, you don't go out for recess, that's where they would watch tape. And I remember sitting to the side with Reggie Miller, and he had his Discman. And I remember him clearly playing that song with Puff and Faith Evans. We can dance, 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 clap your hands. And like he was all in the locker room getting ready, dancing like all night long. And I just remember that in the locker room, and just like, yo, this is not the Reggie Miller people be villainizing. Like, yo, Reggie got moved, and he like Faith Evans. I thought that was dope.
Yeah, that is dope. That is dope.
I remember that. I remember like, huh?
I want to play devil's advocate for a minute. What was your toughest interview?
Well, before I answered that, the other interview was probably Sean Kemp. Sean Kemp always gave me his time when he was on Seattle and he was on Cleveland. And we shared the fact that we both played the alto saxophone. So he's always been kind to me. As it relates to the toughest interview, I'll be honest with you. When I was a kid with the Nets had signed Xavier McDaniel. Remember X-Man?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So there was a point where I had an executive producer on my radio show. His name is Chris Carino. He's actually the voice of the Nets on WFAN to this day. And the woman who brought me in, her name is Amy Shear. They were trying to get Xavier McDaniel to sit down with me and talk. And for whatever reason, Xavier McDaniel ain't want to talk to me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they would like tell my parents, like, yo, X-Man don't want to talk to Scoop. So like, I don't think I ever sat down with X-Man, but like, he will always speak to me in the locker room like it was cool. So you had like a lot of OG vets on that Nets team. Like you had Sam Cassell, you had Kendall Gill, but then you had like older guys. You had like Xavier McDaniel, you had Michael Cage on that team. You had, at one point, you had Elliot Perry on that team. That's the guy that pulled his socks up all the way. And I'll never forget, in the Nets locker room, he had waves. Yo, y'all thought he used Sporting Waves and Murray's. This dude, after every game when he get out the shower, would put Vaseline in his hair and brush his waves and put his do-rag on. He ain't never used Murray's grease.
I used to use that Vaseline trick too, bro.
Yeah. So, I mean, Xavier McDaniel was probably the guy that never would talk to me, but I soaked up so much game from just watching. I mean, that locker room had like Sherman Douglas in there. And I mean, I remember watching videos of Sherman Douglas when he played at Syracuse with Derek Coleman and Ronnie Cycli. Like, it was just an Encyclopedia Britannica full of like legends in that locker room, even as a young kid, that I remember seeing posters of them in my family's, sneaker store as a kid.
Right. So you still follow the Nets in Brooklyn, right? And news broke about Kevin Durant's injury. What do you think happens to the Nets now?
James Harden is their star when they at home, and Kyrie and James Harden are their star when they're on the road. But I also
No, go ahead.
But there's some other things. I mean, number one, ultimately the Nets are going to have to make another move at the trading deadline. Even before the news came out today, I have been hearing some things about just Paul Millsap, particularly because he's not really playing. He's four-time All-Star. He and the Nets are trying to facilitate a trade, but ultimately, if that doesn't happen, there could be some buyouts in the works with that. But I think the Nets, the one thing that is impressive to me is, you have other guys on that team not named Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant that have really stepped up. And to be honest with you, their bench and their core, their role players are really what I enjoy watching. So you got like Nicholas Claxton, who many people thought was going to be the replacement for Jared Allen. I'm disappointed that they traded Jared Allen, but they had to do what they had to do. But then you have other guys like Day'Ron Sharpe that have come up big, Bruce Brown Jr. have come up big. And really Blake Griffin has been an anchor for a lot of those role players on that team. Then you have guys like Cam Thomas, who really was a gold mine for them and really, was playing well during the summer league and it's carried over. And, even, I hate saying his name, but David Duke Jr. For the Nets as well has been pretty, has done well for them as well. And so I think I like their role players this year better than last year.
I do too.
And they had some holes, particularly when they had to go against Milwaukee in the playoffs last year. Kai was out with his ankle, and then James couldn't give it a go with his hammy. And they really depended heavily on Kevin Durant, and Joe Harris kind of disappeared some. So I think Joe having that surgery and coming back sooner rather than later, is pretty much on brand with getting ready for that playoff push after the All-Star break.
So how long is KD supposed to be out?
About a month.
A month. Okay. Well, yeah, that shouldn't hurt him too bad. Do you think that Kyrie playing only road games you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends on who you ask. If you ask Kyrie, he wants to play regardless because if you really think about just that whole process of that team being fortified, it was his idea for he and Kevin to join the Nets. And I think had he not played at all, I'm told by sources that he would feel like it would be his fault if the Nets didn't win because he didn't play due to the whole COVID vaccination turmoil. And so the fact that he is playing road games as a start But I also think it's a start of a bigger conversation of, one, will New York City relax their vaccination mandates? One. Two, what will happen with the new mayor, Eric Adams, specifically because before he came into office, he talked about how he was not going to change the rules. And I've had this conversation with other people privately. I'll share publicly. I think that there is a burden of representation with Eric Adams, particularly because he is a Black mayor in office in New York City. And the last one that there's been is Dinkins. And then after Dinkins, that was in the 90s. I mean, the New York City subway cars were red the last time we had a Black mayor in office. Right. And then it went from that to Giuliani and on and on. So I think he has to be very careful and has been very careful on what he said and how he said it. But, ultimately, I think it's a bigger conversation. And I think that come like March, April, I think those conversations are worth having. But I think right now with these cases going up and slowly trying to go down, I think that's a conversation. But, there's been reports about Kyrie potentially still playing and the Nets being fined. That's going to be interesting as well. I don't have on that, but I do think that those are some of the things that, you got to look at moving forward as the Nets are trying to win a championship.
Right, hold up, because to me, I think it's fine that, they play them on road games in the regular season, but in the playoffs, when, how do you manage that in the playoffs? Like they built that team to win now. They have the chance to win now, and then they get in the playoffs and he can only play road games. Like, what if they're the home team?
So two things. One, I think the biggest steal or the biggest acquisition, I'll say, because they didn't steal, the biggest acquisition of the offseason was Patty Mills signing with the Nets.
Okay.
Because that was a filler. When you look at the Nets and their starting lineup, like October, November, you pretty much had Harden, Durant, Patty Mills, and any iteration of like LaMarcus Aldridge and Nick Claxton. But when you use James Harden, you pretty much have a built-in playmaker. You have like a Tracy McGrady type who can sag off the ball. He can be the playmaker. He can cause havoc in the pick and roll. He can do a myriad of things. So then when you are go into away games and you have Kyrie basically shifts as a 2, although he works as a dual guard or as a lead guard, almost like an OJ Mayo type who can both facilitate and score at will. That causes havoc for your opposing team's defensive scheme. I think when you look at this situation with Kyrie specifically, two things come to mind. It reminds me of the baseball playoffs where you have pitchers on days rest. Right. So like I remember watching the Yankees back in the day and in the regular season, if David Cone pitched Monday this week, you may not see him again for 2 weeks. Well, in the playoffs, it's different because if the playoff game is Monday, he might be off like Tuesday, Wednesday, but then you see him on Friday. Kyrie's situation with Brooklyn reminds me of that. Now, if I'm Brooklyn, I'm trying to be a third place team because you'll play more away games. Right.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, you would have to strive to not have the home team advantage. Mm-hmm. The home court advantage, rather. That's going to be interesting to see how that play out. What you about to say, B?
No, I wanted to go into your career. A lot of people, for some people who might not know, you're a triple threat. So you have sports, you're an executive producer, many shows, starting with Scoop B Radio, of course. That's one of my favorites, but many shows. And then you are synced with hip hop, which is not normal for many sports writers. Recently, we've seen you with Jim Jones, Memphis Bleak, just to mention a few. What is the thing with hip hop? That how do you mesh the sports with the hip hop? How was that?
I'm a child of hip hop. My nana owned a house on Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. I grew up in a sneaker store. I went to school in New York City as well as northern New Jersey. That kind of goes hand in hand. my aunt used to babysit LL Cool J at East Elmhurst, Queens. I have my ex-girlfriend used to babysit Jadakiss' grown son. I've just always been around hip hop for some reason. And I think that hip hop to me, I remember my mom telling me years ago, like, I know you like basketball, but there's more to life than basketball. And I remember being at a point where basketball didn't love me back as much as I love basketball, and career-wise. And I had to find a way to pay the rent. And so I was freelancing. I was writing at the Source for free because they weren't paying me. I had to, maneuver at Respect Magazine. I had to do stuff at Vibe. And so I naturally just kicked it with different people. I knew rappers from Harlem, rappers from East Orange. I knew rappers from Newark. I knew rappers from Long Island, to grad school in Long Island. So, it's just always been that thing. And so, basketball and hip hop have always been hand in hand. It's just, that's the point that I'm in. And, even on the Chicago side, I know rapper, Lupe Fiasco, stuff like that. So it's just always been there.
And that's dope that you said that, you was writing for free for the Source. Like, people think just because, your name is attached to something that the money come with it, but you had to grind and grind and grind to get to that money. And that's good for people to hear. Like, yo, you didn't get paid for everything you did, but everything you did helped to the point to where you got paid.
So to be transparent, Bally Sports is where you find all my sports stuff, where I'm a full-time reporter, analyst, and host, anchor. I do a bunch of stuff over there, but then once a week I do Instagram lives with Bovada, which is a sports betting site. And I was hosting it with retired porn star Lisa Ann, but now I'm doing it by myself through Bovada, and I bring in a different guest every week. So, we started out with Jim Jones, then we have Fredro Starr. And then, we just did Vinny from Naughty by Nature. I'm not sure when this is going out, but next couple of weeks, we will have Ed Lover next week. And then, the week after that, we got two. We have Uncle Luke and Memphis Bleak.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's what's up, man. You definitely a busy man. You got more hustles than a Jamaican.
Something like that.
That's what's up, man. Back to the NBA. How you think Klay looking?
He's adjusting. I mean, I think one of the cool things about the Warriors is that before he came back, Jordan Poole surprised many people. I talked about Cam Thomas with the Nets in the summer league. Jordan Poole did his thing in the summer league for the Warriors, and it carried over to the regular season. And you even had other role players like Damian Lee, who know their role, playing alongside his brother-in-law and Steph Curry. But you got the Draymonds, you've got the you brought Iguodala back. The gang is coming back together. And I think that they were in a good space. I think Klay is in a good space. He was on a minutes restriction at first, but it's coming together, and I'm excited to see how it ends out in the playoffs.
Tell me, B, Chicago, they just announced that Lonzo's having surgery. Will that slow anything down over there for us?
No, because I think that the Bulls have so many weapons. If you go back to my reporting, as far back as inauguration day of last year, Lonzo Ball has been on their radar. And the good thing about the Bulls specifically that works in their favor is this. When Lonzo was out with COVID, Kobe White held the fort down scoring wise. And I think one of the strengths that are also a weakness, is like a catch-22, is that last season, Kobe White was their starting point guard, but he was more of a scorer. But Zach LaVine kind of balanced that out for Chicago because of his playmaking ability. And, you look at that Bulls roster, You also have a few other guys. Number one, I think Nick Vucevic is not totally recognized by the mainstream for his contribution. And I come from the old school where if you have a point guard and a big man, you have it made as it relates to starting a team. So I look at Nick Vucevic, and I also look at DeMar DeRozan, who to me is one of the best mid-range shooters in the league. I think he and Jimmy Butler impressed me with their mid-range game in a world where everybody is fascinated by the long three-pointer shot by the point guard all the way up to the center. So I think the Bulls are in a good situation despite that. And I think this is the test of what you'll really see, because I think early in the first quarter of the season, you saw Washington playing very well. And then, I think the NBA kind of caught up to Washington, right? So then you look at the Bulls, and they started out hot, and the Nets surprised many people because they did well without Kyrie. But then when you look at the Bulls in the second quarter of the season are now going through some of the things that other teams are going through, whether it's health and safety protocols, injuries, and what have you. So I think that, watching the Bulls play the Nets, their last matchup, you saw how both teams adjusted, how both teams dealt with missing players and injuries. But the Bulls still are a very young team. Zach LaVine's been in the league a long time, but this is the first time that I can remember where he's on a first place team. And then the Bulls have to kind of gel and adjust, but I think they got the right coach in Billy Donovan to do that. So I think it's an adjustment. I think that the Bulls have a Ryan Arcidiacono that they miss right now. He just signed a 10-day contract with the New York Knicks. He's a leader defensively that I think they're missing some. And I just think that they really, really have been impressive to watch, but we'll see how it happens. I don't have a crystal ball. I just think those adjustments are going to be worth examining.
All right. Speaking of injuries, how do the Miami Heat keep winning no matter who's on the floor?
Mindset.
I got something for you off this after this. That's good. That's good, B.
Thank you. I think that you've gone through stretches where there's no Bam Adebayo, there's no Jimmy Butler at times. Tyler Hero has proved a lot of critics wrong. And I think you got guys like Duncan Robinson who step in. You got just a plethora of guys who just know their role and they execute within that structure.
How about is Tyler Hero your sixth man of the year?
He's in the conversation.
Definitely.
He's in the conversation, definitely.
Definitely.
B, when you say mindset, right? I'm going to take you back a little bit and spin off of what Game spoke on with the source, right? As people probably who don't know, I've had the luxury of working beside you for a while, and I've seen a journey. And one thing I admire about you is your mindset when it comes to vision and faith. So we take it from the source to CBS Radio. There was another spot, I don't know if we want to mention, we want to get him any shine. Then we go to Heavy.
Respect Magazine?
Oh, we have Respect, not Respect. In a place in New York where you were there for a small stint.
Oh, MSG, man. MSG.
So we go from, we took the source. I was blessed to be there, so we took it from the source and CBS Radio, Respect Magazine, MSG, Heavy, Valley.
Basketball Society, Heavy,
Basketball Society, man, I mean, and to go on, not even all the side hustles, Vibe Magazine. I mean, you covered everywhere. Sports Illustrated. I mean, you Google Brandon Robinson, Scoop B. Robinson, it's everywhere. But, I was blessed to be beside you and through those journeys, the valleys and peaks. And to me, it was the mindset you had that pushed you through. Where does that come from? Where are you pulling from? Like I remember you told me, like, he said, Barry, I'm leaving the source. And like at that time, I thought the source was like the biggest thing ever. And the confidence you had at that moment where you left and you ended right up at CBS, the next move.
So a couple things. Number one, I knew what the journey was before being around any of those letters. When I finished grad school in 2011 from Hofstra University, I was living in my grandmother's basement apartment, collecting food stamps, collecting unemployment. I remember my refrigerator, I had a double door fridge. The refrigerator side didn't refrigerate my food. The freezer side was my refrigerator. I didn't have an oven. I didn't have a stove. I had hot pot, hot plate, microwave, crock pot, George Foreman grill, and a toast oven. And I had an Xbox with the antenna and a Verizon app where I would get my grandmother's cable from upstairs and I would watch the games on TNT. I remember building relationships by freelancing. We talk about, places. I freelanced at one point at 13 different publications before I landed at The Source. We're talking Ebony. We're talking Jet. Ebony, where you write a story, you send an invoice, you wouldn't get a check for like 6 months. We're talking Vibe, where you might be waiting for a check for 3 months. We're talking the Queens Times Ledger, the Brooklyn Courier, the West Orange Chronicle, the East Orange Chronicle. And that's where you and I met, Barry. We met through a guy that we know named New Era, who was the cousin of Jabril Peppers. And I remember at the time just freelancing. The freelancing at different publications built a relationship. So I remember relationships was always the key. And, I remember pitching Jabril Peppers to the East Orange Record newspaper and them saying, how do you know him? How can you get in touch? I remember when Jabril was in high school and I used to text him during homeroom or before games and stuff, and he would give me quotes. And, ended up pitching his story when he was going to make his commitment to Michigan to Max Preps. And Max Preps is owned by CBS. And then in the same breath, months later, building a relationship with Kyrie Irving in 2013 at his basketball camp at Montclair State University in New Jersey, and, connecting dots there, and then pitching that story to, after doing it at Max Preps, pitching it, or at the West Orange Chronicle, pitching it to Max Preps, and just over time, just building a Rolodex. And I think that's the most important thing. So when we get to the point where The Source is here, I remember them interviewing me and saying, we have an expressive resume, but we can't pay you. What do you want to do? And if I had said, bye, sayonara, arrivederci, don't let the door hit you with a good Lord split you, I wouldn't have been in the point where I was at that press conference with Adam Silver, because I was able to get the credentials to go. I was able to go to the All-Star game and do all those different things. And so over time, you just build those relationships. And it's funny because where I am now at Bally, all those relationships that I built within the NBA through teams, through Kyrie Irving, through various other things, they've all carry over. So, no matter what publication you're with, you have a phone, you have an email address, and you build it with people, those relationships carry over. Even, a situation, when I was in grad school at Hofstra, I interned at NBC at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, at MSNBC specials. And I remember, this was 2010, I remember bumping into Lester Holt when he was second behind Brian Williams. Now he hosts NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams. And I've been being booked on MSNBC more. That was the day you plant the seed is not the same day you get the fruit. And, 10 years later, now the relationship with MSNBC. So it's just about growth. It's not it's not the microwave success. It's the full cooked meal, so when I was at The Source and things didn't work out, it served its purpose at that time. When I was at CBS, I learned so much during that time. I learned about people reading left to right in tweets and left to right in headlines, and how to, go viral based off of stuff that people say. Vibe magazine. I remember a time when, I have a good relationship with NBA Hall of Famer Isaiah Thomas. I remember when he took that job with the Liberty, and, people wanted to know why would the Liberty hire him? Why would they put him in that situation? And, I called him and I said, yo, man, I'm penning this piece. And, what do you think about this? And I asked him about his eye for talent. Like when he drafted Tracy McGrady, when he drafted Kevin Garnett, when he drafted Trevor Ariza, this person, that person, like, what did you see? And I think that the relationship part, even before I got signed, carries over into now that I am signed, because everybody who was in my position doesn't always get as close as I may get. So I think that every step of the way taught me something, even with, like you talked about the source, like knowing how to pitch stuff, knowing how to get merchandise, learning how to build your brand and get brand marketing or brand sponsorship deals with this company. It was all part of that during the process. I didn't understand it at the time, but it's a coming of age, so to speak, and it all makes sense later.
Got it.
AB, let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, man. I think this is the best they've been since LeBron left. I didn't see them being as good as they are right now. Why are they so good right now?
Number one, coaching. Bickerstaff is doing his thing this year, and then I think that culture that was there before him, he and that team didn't get along. I think also the addition of Larry Markkinen was very much a plus. Like I remember sitting with Larry during his draft process, and we were talking about how when he's from Finland, and he played at University of Arizona. And he talked about how he stayed up late or early in the morning to watch the 2006 finals between the Heat and the Mavericks. And then he watched the Lakers and the Celtics, yes, sir, in 2010, I believe. And how much he enjoyed watching Dwayne Wade and Kobe Bryant's game. When you watched him with the Bulls in Chicago, they often used him more at the 4, and many people were comparing him to Dirk. And I feel like that wasn't really, he just looked kind of spastic and he wasn't free flowing. And I feel like in his role in Cleveland, he's allowed to play more off the ball. And he looks less like Karolinko and more like a fluid. I don't know if I can compare him to Wade and Kobe, but he's just moving more as a 2-3 than he is a 4-5. And I think that's been part of their success. I also think bringing in Rajon Rondo in that trade is definitely going to help them exponentially. Rondo has aspirations of being a head coach after his career is over. And I think he'll be on that fast track, kind of like Jason Kidd did after retirement, Derek Fisher as well. But I also think I just think that I think that their front office, Kobe Altman, and others are really dedicated in building a team via youth and not so much based off of let's replicate what we did with LeBron. I think anytime you put a LeBron on a team, they have a 3 to 4 year window. And I'll say that if LeBron was not to retire a Laker, Cleveland would be a good fit on his way out.
That's something. That's something to see. That'll be something to see.
Definitely. AB, I got a question for any up-and-coming journalists that are watching the Smoke Talk podcast. I got 2 questions. What advice would you give them, and how important is social media to journalism today in today's time?
The advice would be, don't take no from somebody who's not qualified to tell you yes. There's a lot of people who appear to be gatekeepers that aren't tapped in themselves. Barry, we've been at parties and get-togethers where we bumped into Lenny S or Ty, and they stopped what they were doing, and it was a conversation. And bumped into Tahiri, it was a conversation, and various people. So you got to know who the talent is, but you also have to know who the exact decision makers are. And sometimes the decision makers can say things to block you. Once you have the conversation with the talent, it's a different story. So that's the advice. As far as social media, it's a gift and a curse, because there are people who feel like because they have a certain amount of followers that they can mistreat people and act as if those that may not be as followed are beneath them. And I don't think that's cool. And I also think that sometimes just because you have a lot of followers doesn't mean that you are a socially adept to run things in a conference call or boardroom or even on the scene at a function. I come from, as much as I'm new school, I'm old school in that it's still, the industry is still about shaking hands and kissing babies and who you went to high school, college with, and who your mom's friend is, and who, you know, you went to church with, and all that other stuff. That stuff still matters in social capital. And I think that COVID and being in the house has really revealed who was still able to call plays from their phone and in Zoom calls while we're bored in the house and in the house bored.
Well, yeah, Brandon, man, I appreciate your time, man. If all hearts and minds are clear, we thank you for giving us your time, and we definitely appreciate your career and what you've done with us, and we definitely look forward to getting with you in the future and doing some more bigger things.
It's gonna come. Thank you for the opportunity to be myself. This it? We not still going?
Hey, man.
Oh, I was being respectful of your time, man.
I'm here. I mapped this out for the evening. So if you got any other questions, I'm here.
Well, what's next for Brandon Robertson?
It depends on when you're releasing this interview. I can tell you.
The interview gonna come out in a couple of days.
be looking out for something on February 1st. Be looking out for something on February 7th. Be actually looking out for two things on February 1st, and be looking out for something else on February 7th.
Yeah, you got the next few weeks.
Down the line.
Got the next few weeks lined up.
What about down the line? Is it like where do you see yourself next 5-10 years? You know, I know you love journalism. I mean, you've been doing this your whole life, literally, and you've been just hitting levels and just keep going up, which is amazing.
I think at this point in my life, it's about the simple things and about the things that are enjoyable. Valley Sports is cool because it's still the same digital setup that I had at my previous employer. But I think the utilization of an in-home studio and an actual studio when I need to as well is the thing that I'm really enjoying. And really calling on old friends. So like sit down with Jeff Jarrett, that's my dude, WWE Hall of Famer. You know, calling my dude Mark Henry.
Perkins.
What you say?
Perkins.
Kendrick Perkins, that's my dude. His wife posted something on Instagram. She was rapping. She took her TikTok video and she was rapping. And I commented and I was like, bars, and I put a chocolate bar and she was laughing. Like it's so much more than just the interview. Like you built relationships with the people you like. It's cool to sit down with somebody, but like, what about the thing you said that somebody remembered years later? Like I remember I was at our All-Star weekend in Toronto. It was cold as hell that weekend, but like I remember it was a media availability and JJ Redick was sitting there. And I asked him, like, what do you plan to do after you participate in the three-point shootout? He was like, well, after I win it, I plan to fly back home and drink a bottle of wine and watch Netflix with my wife. So when he said that, I said, oh, word, Netflix and chill? He goes, yeah, Netflix and chill. He didn't know what that meant at the time, right? Then he mentions it on his podcast. He's like, yo, I learned what Netflix and chill was. And he posted something on his Instagram. And I commented. I was like, hey, yo, Netflix and chill. He was like, yo, that was you. Ha, ha, ha. And then he ended up following me on Twitter. We've been trying to find a way to, you know, make things happen on my show. But it's like, now you see my ESPN, but it's like things like that, things you say that carry weight. You know, like Mark Cuban, one of the dopest dudes you ever meet. Me and Mark, you know, our relationship spans 10 plus years, and we met via email. Like when I was in grad school, I was working on my graduate thesis. And he gave me quotes for something, and then like I had him on the show at CBS. And I'll never forget. Mark said something, and I asked him his opinion on something. And he's like, you know, excuse my French. He's like, you know, I really don't give a fuck. And I was like, man, you sound like my father. My name is Donald Duck. I don't give a fuck. And so then he's like, yo, that's hilarious. I'm gonna use that. So fast forward, right? NBA All-Star Weekend 2019. I'm at Michael Jordan's party. I was invited. I remember people used to get me in. Yo, I got an invite. I was invited. And I see Mark Cuban. And Mark and I know each other email, but we had never met in person. So I pulled him. I said, come here. I shook his hand. I said, Mark. He goes, what? My name is Donald Duck. And he looked at me. He goes, I don't give a fuck. And it's
That's
little
dope.
things like stuff you say, like that carries weight. And it's like, it carries over to your work. I remember like over the summer, there was something that was going on in the league and Mark was refuting it or whatever. And I picked up the phone and I called Mark and I said, yo, what's going on with, he was like, he goes, who's this? Scoop. Yo, what's up? I was like, nothing. Then he's like, I was like, yo, what's going on? I need a quote. And he gave me the whole quote. And, you know, like it saved him or just helped him save face in that. Like, you never know how my name is Donald Duck carries over to a real life news situation when you need that quote. So it's like what you say, how you move, how you make people feel. It all carries into the whole media space. And it all started from talking about Donald Duck.
Right.
In journalism, is it real competitive?
Yo, it's people in this space that don't like you based upon something you say on Twitter or Instagram. And then when they meet you in real life, it's like, yo, he's actually cool. Talking about me, like, but then I've been in situations where like there's people who are corny, but they're online, but then you meet them in person and their humor is funny as hell. I think the biggest thing is when you go out to eat or like when you have fellow journalists that come to your city or you come to their city and they get to know you offline. Like they know you for your work, but dude, you actually know each other. You build that rapport. But the funny thing is that level of hate or dislike or mistrust, or it's been like that since the beginning of time. I hear stories about, and I'm not going to talk about that on here, but stories about Stephen A. and Chris Broussard and how people in their age bracket was beefing back then, and it carries over into their 50s and their 60s. It's just part of the game.
Kind of like hip hop.
Yep.
And kind of like the NBA, where you know back in Jordan's era, nobody really kicked it and chilled, and now everybody the homie.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, you've been plugged in there. I mean, like, you've been plugged into so many celebrities, stars. I remember you took me to this party. I've never been to a party like this. It was in New York City. It was summertime. And it was like a mansion. I don't know, it was a loft party, a mansion party. I don't know what it was. Where like it was like I had never been to a party where you come in there and it's like every 5 seconds somebody's coming up to you want champagne. The people just moved to Florida. They just sold their place and moved to Florida. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. That was the best party that I've ever been to, where you know they're bringing hors d'oeuvres, lobster every time you turn. And you know, he's like, B, come with me. And I'm like, all right. And like some of the places I've been, man, it's been amazing. That was an amazing experience, man.
Because in those moments, it's not about work then, although it is about work later. It's about social capital and how you can collaborate on projects. And it's like, when you think about it, Will Smith and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air taught you a lot about hobnobbing and schmoozing, and all you doing is being you, your clothes, your swag, how you put that all together, and how people perceive you and how you perceive people when you're in the room. It's all about working the room.
Big facts.
That was an amazing experience, man.
Yeah. So I know you don't be doing predictions, man, but
you see these people on the internet?
Game brain, man. You always ask me what do you think about it. That's the game I always want to know. Like.
I always want to know. Will the finals be the Golden State Warriors and the Brooklyn Nets?
They have a chance. They both do. It just depends on continuity and who stays healthy. And I think the other thing is just like health and safety protocols. Who was getting COVID? Like it's guys that's getting COVID 2-3 times, and they like the Charlotte Hornets. They're just getting over COVID. Like the last person has it, and it's like I was at the Garden the other day and was talking to somebody within the Hornets, and we were just discussing like how I feel like that whole COVID outbreak started with like Charlotte or Chicago, and it carried over to like Brooklyn, and then everybody started getting it. And so I think that herd immunity in the NBA specifically could prevent it from being something crazy come playoff time. I'm no doctor, and I don't predict the weather. That's my thing now when I go on. People ask me predictions. I'm not a doctor, and I don't predict the weather, and they back up off me. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at the Warriors and what they've done, I think that they're in a good position, but so are the Suns. The Suns are still the Western Conference champs. And I still think that Utah and teams like Memphis are young and they're clawing. And I still think that the Lakers are still figuring some things out. I think that they're still a YMCA team.
They're a YMCA team?
They're a YMCA team that could still outrun certain teams in the gym. And I think that they're still figuring and tinkering with a lot of things. So
I want to ask you this. What is the problem with the Lakers?
Stars who aren't used to being role players.
So it's not just Russell specifically.
No, and I think that people don't like Russ. So I think there's people who don't like Russ, and they're using this opportunity to get their licks in because they don't like him.
Yeah, he went off. He went off the other night.
Yeah.
But, so it's just that you think that stars are learning to be role players.
Definitely, and I also think that I don't think Frank Vogel. I think Frank Vogel won a championship 15 months ago, but he won a championship without some of those other players that are currently on that team. And so I think that ultimately, I never call for another man's job because I don't want anybody to come for mine. But I think it's an adaptation of coaching and players, and allowing players to be players, but allowing the coach to be a coach. It's finding a middle ground. I also think that rotations are interesting. I think Dwight Howard should be used a lot more. I also think missing Anthony Davis has been to their detriment. And I also think injuries, even going back to Malik Monk or Kendrick Nunn, and some of those other players have been to their detriment at the beginning of the season. So I think it's a lot. You know, DeAndre Jordan as a big man, I think he's kind of been labeled ever since leaving the Nets. But I mean, you got to consider the sourcing on that, because the Nets were playing in a Mike D'Antoni system last year anyway, which doesn't complement big men. Right. Mike D'Antoni was the lead assistant for the Nets this year. Now he's in Memphis, or excuse me, in New Orleans with the Pelicans as a consultant to what's our buddy that's the head coach over in New Orleans, Barry? Willie Green.
Willie Green. Oh man. Call that, right? Call that.
Yeah, you broke that.
Yeah. Call that, man.
You broke that. You did that.
Yeah.
That did that.
Yeah. Well,
so you think there's a chance that the Lakers could still have a chance?
I think that they are still. I think the playoffs are a new game, and I feel like you start how you finish. So I feel like, you know, you get those kinks out now, and then you see what happens in the playoffs. But, you know, I think it's a lot of personality on one team. They remind me a lot of the 2006 Miami Heat that ended up getting together after they got Pat Riley on the sideline.
Yeah.
That's going to be something to see, man. That's going to be something to see. B, we got a couple minutes left, man. Is there anything you want to tell the people, man? Anything special, man? You already gave us the game on journalism.
He holding on to it. He said no.
Just be you. Just be you. Enjoy the process and have fun. And February 1st, February 7th, be paying attention.
That's it, man.
Hey, look, man, I want to give a big shout out to our other co-host, Pappy Black. Congratulations on what you're doing right now. Congratulations on your album dropping, Bet on Black. If you listen to hip hop or you fuck around, definitely get out of play. And for our hearts and minds is clear, man. This has been sponsored and powered by Genco. Thanks again, Brandon Robertson. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.
I guzzle a cold Bex as I push this pen, these mental calisthenics. I get sued by gyms. I told the whole world who to not let in. I flat twist your dreads with these new buck Tims, bro. Who but him? I say things that may bring screwed up wins. I'm in the gold digger proof, sue what bends. My cash cow get grass now, moolah boo. When I cut the cash now, it be blue wagyu. Swag who match who? My fly got two sides, Gemini tattoo.